It feels like it's too dark in here, but like, we live in a dark world, so it's fun. So, the Peloponnesian War. You've probably heard of it. It's between Sparta and Athens. It started in 431 BC and it ended in 404 BC. You know, Lysander, he like starved out Athens and Sparta wins the war. A play, Lysistrata, written by Aristophanes and performed in 411 BC, 20 years into this war, was about how everyone just wants the war to end. Why is this war still going on? Like all super cool children, I went through a classics phase between the ages of like 8 and 13, and I read everything I could get my hands on, including Lysistrata. I remember this play as pretty funny, but also very raunchy. A group of Athenian and Spartans, led by a woman called Lysistrata, get together and they try to end the war by instituting a sex strike. And the play ends with the Spartan and Athenian generals like together in a tent signing a peace treaty with like comically huge boners. But of course, I did have to reread it for this video, and that's not really it. Part 1, Lysistrata. Hi book people, I want to start and I want to say that I have never studied the classics like officially in like some sort of course. I just kind of read them for fun, and I don't think that means I don't have anything interesting to say about the classics, but I just wanted to let you know that in case like there's an undergrad watching this video at like 11:05 p.m. and they have an essay due at 11:55 and they have to get that on WebAssign or whatever. Girly, just read the book. Just read the book. Just form your own opinion. Get out of here. People on the internet, at least where I hang out on the internet, have been talking a lot about the 4B movement in Korea, which I do not feel qualified to talk about, but it's very interesting. Link me the interesting videos below. But when people talk about the 4B movement, they also bring up Lysistrata, a play where women use a sex strike to solve a societal ill. And I saw this very interesting comment that kind of just stuck in my head. And I have no idea where this was. It's one of those things that I read maybe on like a YouTube comment or a Reddit comment or on Blue Sky. And someone said, it's really interesting that people always bring up Lysistrata and call it a feminist play when it was performed at a time where the joke was that, haha, imagine women being able to do anything. And I didn't really remember the play that well, but I thought, well, that sounds interesting. That's not how I read it at all. And that just kind of stuck in my head. And it made me want to reread Lysistrata. So I found this book on my Northern Kentucky book trip, which is kind of interesting because it's written by a professor at Boston University, here in Boston. It's called 3 Plays by Aristophanes. By the way, I am sure I'm pronouncing all of these Greek words wrong, and I'm so sorry. Staging Women, translated and edited by Jeffrey Henderson. And this, I think I've mentioned before, is how I prefer to read these types of books. Like, I want essays explaining to me the context. I want like a bunch of notes explaining the jokes and what kind of famous people they're referencing, because I don't know a lot of history. This is how I like to read all of it. And this was a fantastic book. What I learned from this book is that right away, Henderson, the author, completely disagrees with that comment that stuck in my head and made me want to reread the book. Let me give you an example. That all female characters, even the naked women of comedy, were played by men does not mean that Athenian drama was a drag show or a tell against the possibility that these portrayals of women were intended to be believable. Even now, as a modern viewer of drama, we understand inherently the kind of suspension of disbelief that comes with watching a stage show. I can sit and I can watch Orpheus and Eurydice like walk out of the underworld. Like, they're not. They're on a rotating wheel on a stage. But when you're watching a play, they're walking out of the underworld. So 2,500 years ago, they were watching women perform a sex strike, even though it was a man in a mask. And I think that that's fine. That comment I saw kind of tricked me into rereading Lysistrata, and I'm glad it did. But I don't think that comment made very much sense. So now let's just talk about the play Lysistrata. I remembered this as a pretty funny but also raunchy play where Athenian and Spartan women get together under like the boss that is Lysistrata, institute a sex strike, war is over, everyone's happy. But that's not really what it's about. The men do want to have sex with their wives, and they last about a week, and there are a lot of comically huge boners. But what actually happens in the play is that while Lysistrata is talking to the young women and saying, here's the deal, we're not going to have sex with our husbands, she has already, not in front of the audience, convinced the older women to go to the Acropolis and take control of the treasury. This play is about a sex strike, but what actually ends the war is that the women have taken control of the purse. The war is no longer being funded because the women physically have taken control of the government's money, and they also physically fight men who try to show up and get the money to fight the war. Like, this play is remembered as a sex strike, but what actually happens is women gain control of government, and they put a stop to the war by saying, we're done now. In the middle of a war, the people are so upset with this war that someone writes a play about women taking over the government and ending the war. That's really way more interesting than a simple sex strike. But on reflection, as an adult woman rereading this play, the fact that that's what happens just kind of removes all of the feminist feelings I had towards this play. Honestly, can we think of anything from this period as feminist? I'm also not a feminist scholar, I'm not a historian, but like, can a male author write a feminist piece of work in a culture where women are not allowed to speak? Are we allowed to do that? Are we allowed to call something feminist? Don't get all cultural relativism on me. I hate that. Women have brains and should be allowed to speak. It doesn't matter what the culture is. Let me read from Henderson here. Men took elaborate measures to avoid any public exposure of their private worlds, principally by discouraging public exposure of the women of their households. A woman seen too often away from her house might be considered neglectful of her duties, and one conversing at any time with strange males would open herself to suspicion of infidelity. And so the private sphere was considered officially separate, hidden by protocols of public invisibility and silence. Ideally, the woman of a man's household would, as the orator Lysias somewhat defensively put it, live so respectfully that they are shamed at being seen even by members of the family, and in the words of Pericles, would be least talked about by men either for praise or for blame. Yikes. I wouldn't call Lysistrata feminist. And also, honestly, reading Lysistrata and the way women talk about themselves, here's one. Here's a line from Coloniki. But what can mere women do that's intelligent or noble? We sit around the house looking pretty, wearing saffron dresses and makeup and cambric gowns and canoe-sized slippers. Yeah, that's how the women in this play talk. It's actually really interesting. Lysistrata in this play seems to be the only woman who has a plan, and she's just kind of bullying all the other women into following her orders. And Lysistrata doesn't talk about a husband. Lysistrata doesn't talk about wanting to have sex. It's like she is not a woman in this play. And all the other women are just like, oh my goodness, a sex strike, oh my god. Oh. Just for another example, here the older women, the chorus, are talking to the older men, and the women's leader says, "Thus I owe it to the polis to offer some good advice, and even if I was born a woman, don't hold it against me if I manage to suggest something better than what we've got now. I have a stake in our community. My contribution is men. You miserable geezers have no stake since you've squandered your paternal inheritance, won in the Persian Wars, and now pay no taxes in return. On the contrary, we're all headed for bankruptcy on account of you. Have you anything to grunt in rebuttal, any more trouble from you, and I'll clobber you with this rawhide boot right in the jaw." She kicks him. Nice. Okay, so the older women are like, guys, like we just have an idea, like we think there might be a problem, like perhaps we stop having a war. Isn't that crazy? But they win. The women literally get control of the Athenian government, and they're like, all right, boys, just stop. And then they see all the power they have. No one in the play thinks for a second like, maybe the government would work better if we had some sort of equal partnership of men and women. They just don't. The other two are also about women taking some sort of power, and then kind of immediately just ceding that power back to the men. So the second play in this book is called Women at the Thesmophoria, and it's about this group of women who are very mad at the playwright Euripides, and they're gonna have him put on trial and murdered for his portrayal of women in his plays. And I learned from this book that Euripides is considered a misogynist, which is quite interesting because I just read Aristophanes' play about Lysistrata and I felt that it was pretty misogynistic. Apparently Euripides wrote about women as realistic characters in his plays where they were like stealing from their husbands or going around and like taking food or wine out of storage or stealing the babies of their slaves and passing them off as their own so that their husband would have heirs. And what's weird is that the women are mad at Euripides for this portrayal of them, not because that's not what they're like, but because they don't want the husbands, the men of their society, to know that that's what they're like, which also seems kind of misogynistic on Aristophanes' part. But in that play, there's a lot of hijinks. It's funnier than Lysistrata, I think. And Euripides' friend dresses up as a woman and goes and tries to be like, oh, I'm a lady. I think Euripides is great. And it's kind of funny. And it just ends with Euripides escaping and the women be like, just write us better, please. And that's the end. The final play called Assembly Women, and it was written a couple years after the previous two, and it deals directly with women getting control of the government. It's like a satire. The women take control of the government. They put huge taxes on wealth and they demand sexual equity for the older women, and the men take this as an opportunity to be like, cool, so we don't have to do anything because you're going to run the household, you're going to rear the children, and you're going to do the government. And they just kind of loaf about. And this government fails. And the joke is like, see, women trying to do stuff. Dumb women. In this book, Henderson suggests that Aristophanes was never seriously suggesting that women should be able to make those decisions, that women should hold any form of government power. He was more pointing out like what would happen if men neglected their responsibilities toward the government. So while I really enjoyed rereading this plays, I don't agree with the comment that I saw that convinced me to reread them, that these are somehow misogynist because the actors were played by men and they were laughing at women. I do think, yikes, on rereading, as like a grown adult, like just Lysistrata, you have suffered for 20 years in an endless war that you don't believe in. You've gained control of the entirety of Athens' like treasury. And you just say, stop it, boys. And you give it back. Like you don't keep any of the power. Is wild. It's wild to me. It's just like the lesson was like, the ladies just need to talk some sense into daddy, and then daddy will take care of it, and he'll stop the war. I don't like that, but I did really like this book, and I will link it below if you want to read it. But also, please enjoy this very funny review from Goodreads. I commiserate with this woman as like a huge prude myself, but like if you are going to seek out plays that famously have giant prop erections, you can't be mad when the giant prop erections show up in the play. It's kind of silly. Part 2, Medea. So this whole conversation inside Aristophanes' plays about Euripides being a known huge misogynist was very interesting to me because I, a kid who read a lot of like classics, loved Euripides because he wrote one of my favorite female characters, of course, Medea. You know, she's not a hero, but she is awesome, and it's so rare to see like a strong female character in, you know, Greek and Roman literature that's not a god. And I love Medea. So I also reread Medea and I still loved it. Medea was originally part of a trilogy and it was performed all together, but we only have the one. We only have Medea. It was performed in 431 BC, so before Aristophanes and before the Peloponnesian War. And apparently this play didn't do as well with the audience. Like, these plays were always given in like contests to select the best drama or whatever. And Euripides didn't do very well, and they think it might be because he took some liberties with the myth of Medea. So Medea is not a historical character, she's a mythical character, and they think he might have changed the ending in a way that made the audience mad. But I'm just going to talk about the text of the play, not like the other versions of the myth. But first, of course, I have to fill you in on the background of Medea, just in case you're not familiar. I don't know, did you have friends when you were 12 years old or something? You weren't reading the Argonautica? So Medea is a princess, but she's also related to the gods. She's the granddaughter of Helios, the sun god, the god representing the sun. And she's the daughter of the king of Colchis. Medea first shows up in the myth of Jason. You know Jason and the Argonauts. It's most famously in the Argonautica. And just the most quick recap of all time. Jason was going to be the king of something, but he didn't. Somebody took over. And so in order to become the king, he has to go get the golden fleece. And to do that, he gets the Argo, and he gets a bunch of heroes, including Heracles sometimes. The myths differ, to like go around and do island adventures. You know, those things in Greek mythology that famously take like 20 years, and like you meet witches and stuff. Medea is a witch. One thing that happens to Jason that's important is he helps Hera, who is disguised as an old, sad woman, across some river. So now Hera really likes Jason, and he's always got like good luck because of that. And they land on Colchis, where the golden fleece is, and Hera is like, hey, there's no way Jason's not going to die. We need to convince Medea to help him. So she has, Hera the god, has Eros shoot Medea with an arrow and make her immediately fall in love with Jason. So Medea, even though she feels quite guilty, betrays her family and helps Jason out. And while they're escaping, Medea kills her own brother to distract her father, so Jason and the Argonauts, and now also Medea, can leave. Medea and Jason get married. You know, it's a love story. Medea is banned from her home country now, obviously because she killed her brother and everything. So they take the golden fleece and they go back. Ioclus, is that where Jason is from? King Peleus is like, I see that you've brought the golden fleece, but like also no, I'm gonna be the king, you're not gonna be the king. And so Medea, in anger, tricks King Peleus's daughters into killing him. And obviously that doesn't make Jason the king because they just murdered the king, so they have to escape. So they escape to Corinth. And they're not royal, but they're just like happy. It's a love story. They have some children together and they live there. Fun. So this is Medea at the start of the play by Euripides. She's kind of an immigrant. She no longer has a homeland. She's made a lot of enemies, but she has dedicated herself to Jason and their family. In the play by Euripides, they have 2 sons. And she has kind of given up everything, including her homeland, to be with this man and have these children. And of course, the play opens with Jason having left Medea to marry Glauce, the daughter of King Creon. That's how the play opens. And this is, of course, bad, because Jason, in the eyes of the gods, including Hera, and like the law of the land, is married to Medea. And you can't just marry someone else. Medea is famously a witch and a murderer. So King Creon, worried about his daughter who's going to marry Jason, is like, Medea, you have to get out of here. And Medea convinces King Creon, like, I totally will. I'll totally go, but you have to give me 1 day to like sort out everything. And Medea uses this 1 day to, you know, plot the murder of Glauce, King Creon, and also her children that she has with Jason. So she does this in order to destroy Jason. She tricks Jason into thinking she's like totally cool with this. She sends her children to this wedding, you know, while their father does a bigamy with this tainted dress and tiara. Glauque is like 20 years old to Jason's 50, and she just likes the pretty things and puts them on, and she just lights on fire. Her father grabs her and lights on fire. The children have already been taken back to Medea's house. She murders them, and then Jason shows up, and he's like, oh man. She flies away at the end in Helios's chariot, like the thing that pulls the sun, and there's dragons, and she has the bodies of her two children, and she's like, see ya. And she buries her sons in the land of Hera. So yeah, like I'm not even joking. Euripides, as like me reading as an adult woman, felt very feminist to me. The discussion they were having felt very modern. Like during the play, we hear from Jason who's like, listen, Medea, I'm doing this for you. I am going to marry a princess, and I'm going to move away, and I'm going to be rich and wealthy, and I'm going to be the king, and I'm going to have children with the princess, and your sons will have royal stepbrothers. That's going to be good for them. I'm doing this for you, actually. And the way Euripides writes Medea responding this just feels very modern. Of course, let me read to you from this translation, which is, Penguin Classics, translated with an introduction by Philip Villicott. I liked this one. I don't know if there's like a better one. Okay, this is Medea talking about her plight. Still more, a foreign woman coming among new laws, new customs, needs the skill of magic to find out what her home could not teach her, how to treat the man whose bed she shares, and if in this exacting toil we are successful and our husband does not struggle, under the marriage yoke our life is enviable. Otherwise death is better. If a man grows tired of the company at home, he can go out and find a cure for his tediousness. We wives are forced to look to one man only, and they will tell us we at home live free from danger. They go out to battle. Fools! I'd rather stand 3 times in front of line than bear 1 child. But the same arguments do not apply to you and me. You have this city, you have your father's home, the enjoyment of your life and your friends' company. I am alone. I have no city. Now my husband insults me. I was taken as plunder from a land, as the earth's edge. I have no mother, brother, nor any of my own blood to turn to in this extremity. So good. I also like this one. Jason is like, so you're banished. I will not desert a friend. I have carefully considered to see that you and the children are not sent away with an empty purse or unprovided. You no doubt hate me, but I could never bear ill will towards you. Euripides is so good at writing that guy who leaves his wife for some 19-year-old, and he's like, I'm doing this for us, like, and then Medea responds, of course, you filthy coward. If I knew any worse name for such unmanliness, I'd use it. So you've come. You, my worst enemy, come to me. Oh, it's not courage, this looking friends in the face after betraying them. It's not even audacity. It's a disease. The worst a man can have, pure shamelessness. However, it is as well you came. To say what I have to say will ease my heart. To hear it said will make you wince. Oh, this is so good. I love her. I love Medea. She has this like righteous anger. Why is Jason allowed to blow up her life and her family, and then he has the audacity to be like, I'm doing this for you. You're my friend. Like, why are you so mad? What are you so mad about? I love that she just says no. She doesn't have to accept it. She's not going to. She will exact a revenge so severe that Jason will never recover. In the play, she really struggles with murdering her children, like, obviously. She plans her escape to Athens with King Aegeus. There's the whole point where the king comes in and she's like, could I live in Athens? And he's like, if you cure my infertility. And she thinks, well, maybe after I kill Glauque and the king, I could just go live in Athens with my sons. Maybe that would be fine. And she kind of steels herself to the fact that Jason has left as if he had no family and he didn't have sons. So she will make it so. She will make it true. So this is Medea talking about parenthood. Enjoy the advantage and good fortune over those who are parents. Childless people have no means of knowing whether children are a blessing or a burden, but being without them, they live exempt from many troubles. While those who have growing up in their homes the sweet gift of children, I see always burdened and worn with incessant worry. First, how to rear them in health and safety, and bequeath them in time enough to live on, and then in this further anxiety, they can never know whether all their toil is spent for worthy or worthless children. It sounds like a very modern telling of parenthood. It it's so interesting that 2,500 years ago, or almost 2,500 years ago, people were having like these thoughts of like, how do I care for my children? Should I have had children? Will I provide them with enough? It's really interesting. Part 3, modern Medea. If I was going to write a modern version of Medea, I would write it about postpartum psychosis, because reading it as a modern reader, it really just screamed that's what was happening. Postpartum psychosis is like a real thing that happens. You give birth, you have all these hormones, and like there's a very small percentage of people that start developing like these intense thoughts of hurting their children, and like they don't want to, but for some reason they feel like they have to. And it's the same way Medea was describing it. It's like she loves her children, she would never do anything to harm them, but she has to murder them. And it felt like the descriptions of postpartum psychosis that you read. You know, that's why postpartum care is so important. One of the many reasons, like, it's just a thing that happens. It doesn't mean those women are evil or bad parents. It's just like a thing that happens. And if they don't have help, if they don't have someone there, then bad things can happen. So we are just like super lucky the pro-life party is controlling the government and not only forcing women to give birth, but stripping all the funding for those postpartum care services. So, you know, lucky for us, the pro-life party is directly responsible for the deaths of women and children. It's going to be great. In the original play, the context of the play is that Medea is justly punishing Jason. Did you catch that? I didn't catch that when I read Medea as a child. But Medea has the approval of the gods. Like Hera is in Jason's corner until he betrays Medea. He breaks his oath to Hera as well as Medea. And so Medea has the approval of the gods. You can tell because she flies away after murdering a king and his daughter and her own children in the chariot of the gods. They approve of her actions. In the context of the play, Medea is right. She drives off in her solar dragon chariot to bury her sons that had to die. It doesn't matter in the play that it was by her hand. It's still Jason's fault. And she buries them in the land of Hera with Hera's goodwill. So Jason's not Hera's special little boy anymore. He broke his bond. Medea's in the right in the play. So that's kind of what I would be referencing. Like, Medea doesn't want to kill her children, but it is what has to happen. And that just feels very like psychotic to me. So it would be interesting to rewrite this play because, like, obviously if you set it in the modern world, you don't have gods or dragons or anything. So it would be interesting to rewrite this play as like Jason is like, oh my God, you've changed since you had a child, and he just abandons her, and we kind of watch her fall into depression and psychosis. It would be a sad play, but it would be interesting. I'm not a writer though, so instead I tried to find some modern versions of Medea to read. First, let's talk about Medea, a New Version by Mike Bartlett from 2012, and I'll be honest, this one sucked. This is bad. Would not recommend. So in this play, Medea and Jason are living in like a rental house in London, and Jason leaves Medea for the young daughter of their landlord. So we're in the future. The Creon character is the landlord. Like, there's no gods or magic in here. The landlord wants Medea and her son out of the house, obviously because Jason is marrying his daughter, and like he feels that it's weird that they're still there. He's like, your husband has moved on. Please get out of this house. It's literally the same story as the classic version. Medea's neighbor takes her son to the wedding with the dress. He comes back to Medea's house where Medea murders him, and the girl puts on the dress, and that whole thing happens, right? Jason watches his new bride burn up with his father-in-law. He drives back, and Medea has used her father's axe, which I guess is the substitute for her grandfather's chariot, to like get on the roof of this rental house holding her son's body. In this play, there's one son. And Jason's just like, what the fuck? I think this doesn't really work the way it works in the classical play. In the classical play, Medea destroys Jason's life. She kills his chance of becoming a royal. She kills his sons, you know, like ending his line. She has ended the relationship he did have with the gods, and she takes off, leaving him in a community where everyone knows what a piece of garbage he is, right? When you modernize it this way, like, Medea's not a witch. She doesn't have any gods backing her up. She doesn't even escape. Like, at the end, she's like, haha, I'm flying away. And then it, like, fades to black. And she's really just, like, on the roof. And I'm sure the police will come. And they'll arrest her. And everyone will look at Jason and be like, oh my god, she was crazy. I'm so sorry. Like, it's just not the same. It just doesn't work. It ruined it. I feel like this guy didn't get the idea of Medea. Also, in the classic version, Medea has like a childminder and also a slave who discuss her plight. And they show a lot of compassion for Medea. They're like, this isn't Jason's house anymore. Like, I worry about her. I worry about the child. And in this play, for some reason, Mike Bartlett wrote a modern version of Medea where the women are like bitches. Like, Medea has a friend come over and like, I'm just checking on you. But she's like, actually, I'm just Jason's friend. I was Jason's friends first. So I'm going to go to his wedding. And it's like, why has the author taken a play that had, seemingly to me, exceptionally feminist characters for the time and then turned them into bitches? Like, this play blames the women in Medea's life for not stepping in and stopping her from doing a bunch of murder. And it's very strange. I really dislike this. Also, Euripides does such a good job showing that Jason is the asshole. Like, Jason is using his words in Euripides' play to be like, I'm doing this for you. I have made this choice to better help our family. I'm going to go live with this hot 19-year-old while you raise your children. And I love you. We're going to be friends. It's fine. What's going on? But like, you know, reading Euripides' version that Jason is like that guy, that asshole that's trying to gaslight you into like, why are you mad? It's upsetting me that you're upset. Like, that guy. Euripides did that so well. For example, in Medea by Euripides, Jason always refers to the children as your sons. You're responsible for your sons. What are you doing to your son's future? Why aren't you thinking about the safety of your sons? And then, when Medea murders them, he finally says, my sons. And in this play, Jason just calls there's one kid, he calls it my son the whole time. And it's like, did he read the play? Like, this is written like Jason is correct. Like, Jason is like, see, this is why I divorced you, because you're crazy. And that's just not the point. It's like he missed the whole point of the play. Let me read you a quote from this play. So this is Medea talking. I divide men into 3 groups: wankers, dads, and rapists. Wankers need a mom. Dads treat us like children, and rapists want to fuck us whether we like it or not. That's why it's difficult to find a man. We have to decide to look after someone, to be patronized all the time, or alternatively, to be constantly screwed around until we're too old and they move on. Jason, I'm not a rapist. Medea, it's a metaphor, Jason. I just... like, how is Euripides so in tune with writing female characters, called a misogynist 2,500 years ago, and this is what we get from the 20th century? Don't worry, the next version I read was good, though. But I was thinking about this, and if I was going to write a version of Medea where Jason, like, we were more compassionate towards Jason, I think it would be interesting. I think you could definitely do it. This did not do it. This was not good. This guy just, like, repeated the text of Medea, but, like, took all of the things out of it that made it an interesting story, which is a negative review. But again, I think you could do something interesting with Jason. Like, Medea even though it wasn't her choice, right? Like Eros shot her with an arrow and she was like magicked into falling in love. But Medea gave up everything for Jason. Imagine what that feels like to be Jason. Someone gave up their life for you and now you're just saddled with them. It kind of, like, imagine Romeo and Juliet. Like, imagine the ending changes and Romeo and Juliet get married and their families, the Montagues and the Capulets, are like, oh, you guys, I guess we're like gonna end our feud. I guess we're together now. Can you imagine how much pressure would be on that union? Like, you are some 17-year-old boy. You marry the first hot 14-year-olds you see, and it ends a 100-year feud between families, and now you're trapped with her, and you can never have a complaint about your relationship, even though it was so brief of a courtship, and you were kind of magicked into it in Jason's case. Like, that would be stressful. What an interesting story to tell. Like, why does Jason want to leave Medea? Is there a reason? Has he always felt this way? Does he feel pressure from being the person responsible for a woman abandoning her whole life? Like, that could be interesting. But instead we got this, like, dang, Medea sure is crazy. Okay, this one was really good though. So this is Medea, a new version by Rachel Cusk from 2015. Rachel Cusk is an author. I read Outline by her last year and it was great. And I have 2 more of her books and I'm so excited to read them. And I really liked this version of Medea. So in this version, Medea is a playwright and Jason is an actor. And Medea has had the more successful career. She has supported Jason in his kind of like fledgling little acting career. At the start of the play, like before we enter, Jason gets cast in what I assume is like a Marvel style movie. Like, he's got a 7-picture deal. He's going to make a whole bunch of money. And the reason he's cast is because the producer's daughter, who's like the young 19-year-old, is like, Daddy, pick him. So Jason has to leave Medea so that he can have this role. And it's just like in Euripides. Jason is like, I'm doing this for us. Like, I'm going to date this hot 19-year-old. We're going to have a ton of money. I will support you. And he kind of just leaves her to take care of the children. And she has to sell the house. And the kids, again, there are 2 sons in this. The kids are like upset. Like, why did you do this to us? Why couldn't you be better so that Dad would stay? And Medea in this play, she like really tries. She tries to keep the kids happy and they're mad at her. She tries to keep the house, but she can't afford it. She can't write anymore because she doesn't have time, because she has to do all of the child rearing all by herself and she can't make it work. So she's just like, no. It's again this kind of righteous anger. Like, why are you allowed to do this? Why is Jason allowed to leave? And I just have to spend the rest of my life like flailing. I have to spend the rest of my life caring for these children, dedicate myself to a family that this man abandoned, and I didn't make that choice. She says no. And in this place, she doesn't murder her sons. She just did what Jason tried to do. She drops her sons off and she's like, you wanted to end this. Here are your children. I will go be a playwright. And she just leaves. She's like, take the kids. Good luck with that. And she leaves. Fascinating decision. And in this play, it ends with Jason calling Medea from the emergency room at a hospital, and the boys have attempted to take their own lives. And Medea is like, kind of sounds like a you issue. Like, she's just like, I told you they're your children. Interesting. So fucking interesting. Every version of this play, Jason just like, I'm leaving the family, sort out your kids. And in this one, the same thing happens. And Medea is just like, no, you do it. She abandons the children. She says, you made the choice to destroy this family, and she leaves. And Jason fails them. He can't father them. He can't sort it out. They end up taking their own lives, or attempting to. It's kind of ambiguous at the end. She puts in the exact same effort that Jason did in all these other plays and matches him just like beat for beat. So it's so interesting. So while I was reading Euripides, and I was thinking postpartum psychosis, Rachel Cusk read Euripides and was thinking about divorce and how that negatively impacts the children. I read this really interesting interview with her. I'm going to read it to you now. For Cusk, the truthful idea of damage to children is the heart of the play. This is what Medea sees, and this is what Euripides sees, and it's so good that someone sees that it absolutely relies on the institutionalized culture of motherhood to mop up and conceal the essential cynicism of divorce. What happens is man leaves woman, children are damaged, and woman is expected to continue their lives and live as a self-sacrificing pretense. The fact of the damage to children is covered up by everybody, and Medea doesn't do that. She won't do it. She says, these are our children, and if you leave me, the grounds for their existence are not there anymore. They are canceled in a way. Jesus Christ, Rachel Cusk, that's so good. A woman is expected to continue their lives and her life as a self-sacrificing pretense. Oh my God, it's so good. Medea just sincerely asking, like, why are you allowed to do this? You unilaterally made a decision for this family and now I have to pick up the pieces? And she says, no, absolutely not. It's so interesting. This is an aside, but whenever you talk about this topic, there's always someone who's like, my buddy from work, he wants to see his kids, but his bitch ex-wife won't let him. He didn't abandon them. She won't let him see them. And I have some good news for your buddy from work, because 94% of the time when men ask for custody, they get it. Even in cases where there's like documented abuse by the father to the children, the father gets custody 72% of the time. It just turns out that men usually don't ask for custody. 91% of the time, men just give up their custody to women, and women have sole custody of the children. After divorce in America, 27% of fathers just voluntarily abandon their children. So you have some good news for your buddy from work whose bitch ex-wife won't let him see the children. You can just tell him like, hey, did you ask for custody? Because 97% of the time fathers get custody when they ask for it. And I'm sure your buddy from work who totally wants to be a good father and totally wants to see his children has the evidence of like the text messages and the emails he sent and like the FaceTime calls that his bitch ex-wife rejected and like all those presents that he sent on their birthdays and Christmas that were like returned in the mail. I'm sure he has all that he can show the judge when he asks for custody, because I'm sure he's like a really good person and he definitely wants to see his kids, and the reason he can't is definitely because of his bitch ex-wife. I'm sure that that's true. So you have good news for him about how we live in a patriarchal society that heavily, heavily, heavily favors men in custody decisions, but for some reason, everyone just acts like that's not the case, even though statistically, definitively by the numbers, it is the case that when men ask for custody, they get it. So maybe you could ask him why he didn't ask for custody, because I'm sure he actually really wants to see his kids. Definitely. He's a good person. Sure. Part 4. Oops, a misandry. So here's the thing. I was convinced by Rachel Cusk's Medea. I felt for her. Why is Jason allowed to leave? Why does he get to make the decision to blow up everyone's life without consequence? But no matter what happens in the play, no matter what happens, I personally, in my feelings about the characters, blame Medea for the sad end to the children. Even when, in this play by Rachel Cusk, the only thing Medea does is exactly what Jason has done every other time. She says, well, I'm not going to do this, so good luck with the children, and she just leaves. I still blame her for their sad end, and that I have committed a misandry. I have lower expectations for men when it comes to fatherhood than women when it comes to motherhood. Like, yeah, it's not fair that men are allowed to abandon their children, but Medea, how could you do that? You're a mother. Like, that is my first thought. Rachel Cusk really helped me unpack this by making me think about it. While we're talking about the classics, I'm going to have to talk about another classic, How to Train Your Dragon 2. Which came out in 2014. Spoilers for How to Train Your Dragon 1 and 2, I guess. I have to tell you about the plot. So, in the first one, Hiccup is like a small little Viking boy, and he has his father's the chief, and he's like a big guy. And like they have this kind of awkward relationship because Hiccup's mom is dead, right? And his father's like overprotective, but also pushing him to be like a big manly man. And Hiccup's mom was murdered by dragons. His dad saw this, or saw the remnants of it. And so like as a community, they're really good at killing dragons, and Hiccup is going to go be a dragon killer, but then Instead, he befriends a dragon, and, he realizes that dragons are friends, and he convinces his community and his father and him repair the relationship, and they all ride dragons at the end. Solid movie. Great movie. How to Train Your Dragon 1. How to Train Your Dragon 2. 5 years in the future. Hiccup's like a big man, and he's training to be the chief even though he feels nervous. And his dad's like, I love you, son. We're buddies. We'll get through this. And there's a war. And so they need more dragons, and they stumble upon this dragon's nest. And Hiccup, oh my god, it's his mom. He's so happy. His mom didn't die. She was just protecting dragons. And then his father shows up, and he's not even mad. They just get back together, and they're like, oh my god, this is so great. We're all so happy. We're a family again. And then Hiccup's dad dies. They win the war, but it's okay that his dad died because he has his mom. So everything is fine. This movie made me so angry. I hate Hiccup's mom. They just forgive her, and then they just kill his dad, and it's fine. Just imagine you grew up with a father who was emotionally traumatized because he saw your mother murdered by a pony. And you only have your dad, but also it's not your real dad because he is so traumatized. He is so overprotective and weird that you never get to know your real father because you have this very strained relationship. And somehow you beat the odds. You grow up to be a normal kid. You repair this relationship with your father who's no longer a broken man. And, despite your terrible childhood, you've moved on and you've made the best of it and your life is fine. And then you find out, no, your mother didn't die in a pony attack. She staged it. She's actually been alive this whole time, just living with ponies. That terrible childhood, she traumatized your father. She ruined your childhood. She abandoned you, for ponies. And you just forgive her. It's fine. That's this movie. They immediately forgive her. It is crazy. She was alive the whole time. Just use your words, Valka. What is this? And it's the same thing as in Medea, Because of the patriarchy, I am much more accepting of men abandoning their children than I am of women abandoning their children in media. I am way more mad at Hiccup's mom than I am at Aladdin's dad, And I think that that's shameful. I should not do that. That's bad. And I think this dissonance is, why we need feminism. This is the patriarchy. We should be equally upset at any parent who fails to care for the child they created, no matter what gender the parent is. When you talk about feminism, there's always some guy that's feminism, huh? Equal rights for equal lefts. I can hit you then. If you're equal to me, I can just hit you. And that's a huge red flag. That guy just wants to beat women. Stay away from that guy. But also it's a crazy thing to say because no, you can't just hit me. You can't just hit anyone. You can't just hit other men because you're both men. We are adults. We use our words. No, you can't hit anyone. In the Medea version of this, Medea abandons her children because she's well, Jason was going to abandon his children. And that's not the correct response. I mean, obviously, it's not fair that men get to do this. The response is not, women should also get to do this. The response is, men should not abandon their children. We as a society should have the same disparaging, shameful remarks towards men who abandon their children as women who abandon their children. No one should abandon their kids, actually. That's the lesson that I've learned. How do we live in a society where men are just allowed to abandon their children? Isn't that weird? I'm sure everybody has some random second cousin Uncle Jim who shows up to Christmas and someone's hey, how are the kids? And he's oh, I haven't seen them in a year. Yeah, but he's still invited to Christmas. But if you had an Aunt Jamie who showed up to Christmas without her children, everybody would be oh my God, how could you celebrate Christmas without your children? What are you doing? How are you here? You're a terrible person. Do you know what I mean? Children deserve all of their parents to be present and available and contributing to their upbringing. And it's crazy that I would still blame Medea, even though Jason was the one in this play actively parenting. If the main parent is a woman, we blame the parent that stayed for how the child turns out. If the man is doing the parenting, we blame the woman for leaving. Man, this play made me feel feelings, and isn't that like good art? So I had fun on this journey of rereading some old classics that I read before now as like a grown-up adult. It's really interesting to me that at the time these were written, Lysistrata would be considered more feminist than Medea. Medea just calls out this inequality in like the household in such a modern way. It's almost devastating that it's still relevant like 2,500 years later. Um, okay, bye.